Before we dive into today's episode, I have something truly special to share. Next September, I'll be leading an intimate women's retreat through the south of France and northern Italy, and you're invited. Picture this: mornings exploring the colorful markets of the French Riviera, afternoons sipping wine, and a hotel view with golden Mediterranean sunsets. Whether you love photography, food, or just want to reconnect with your playful creative self, this trip is designed for you. Spots are limited, so if all this sounds like your kind of adventure, please visit tourwithabsolutely.com and look for the tour France and Italy with Crystal. You can also send me a message or check out the show notes. Hey guys, my name's Crystal Kenny, and I'm in love with creating. All things artistic and imagination involved. I'm an American girl who chased her creative dreams all the way to Paris, France, making a living using photography. This podcast takes you inside the stories of all the artsy folks I've met along the way and gives you that extra push to discover your creative gifts. The desire to create is deeply inside each and every one of us, and I give you the tools and inspiration to find a new way of living a more creative life. This is La Vie Creative, the podcast. So welcome to the show, Laura.
Hi.
It's great to chat with you. I was really enjoying checking out your website, all the things you're doing, but I always like to start with where you're from and what brought you to Paris.
Okay, well, I'm from New York. I'm from Westchester, New York, actually, and I grew up there. I studied acting there at all the major studios in New York City. Circle on the Square, Strasberg Institute, Stella Adler Conservatory. I was at NYU basically for theater all day long, theater. And I was 18 at the time. And at one point decided, I really should go uptown and get an academic education as well. So I transferred at one point to be with a whole different type of group of friends. I transferred to be in a different environment, a more academic environment, thinking this is New York City. I can study acting anywhere. There are fantastic teachers in this city, and that was the case in the mid 80s and late 80s. And so that's what I did. And I decided to get an academic degree at Barnard College and in Italian literature. I always loved languages. I had studied French also and German in high school. So I was just going to strengthen my Italian language and heritage skills. And the wonderful thing is that while I continued studying acting in New York City, with Warren Robertson, who in a way was just very pivotal for my approach to this very day as an actress and teacher. I was able to marry both interests of languages and theater with my first job out of college with an Italian Commedia dell'arte company. So I worked with this company for a couple of years and made a living doing that, singing and dancing and doing Lazzi in Italian in New York and traveling. We also went to Italy, and it was really wonderful. And I also worked at the Epcot Center, through Disney with that company.
That sounds like such a dream come true. Like it's being on stage so quick and traveling to Italy and singing and dancing. I mean, it was like the perfect setup.
Yeah, it was really like the ideal job out of college. If anyone asks me, like, what was your job out of college? I get to say I played Colombina with I Giullari di Piazza.
That's so fun. And what first drew you to acting? Like, why did you decide that path?
I was really lucky to grow up in a town where we had so many opportunities for anything to do with the arts. My public school and the local neighborhood offered so much in terms of artistic, creative outlets. And I started studying at 14 years old at the Gloria Landis School of Performing Arts with people like Matt Dillon and Vinnie Spano and Kevin Spacey, Elizabeth Berridge, like, people who have names in this career and who came from my hometown. And it was extremely inspiring. And I loved the work. And I have to also just say that my very first teacher was Mary Shelley, McCarthy Shelley. She has a lot of last names, sort of like me. I've had a lot of last names in this career, so sometimes it's hard to find me. She really had the most influence on me as an actress, and the work being so much about connecting and listening and reacting and being present and not acting. And I learned that at 14. I mean, I was super young when I started to work that way. And I got the point of it immediately. It was just very exciting work to see people working that way was really exciting.
Yeah, it sounds like you were in the perfect place to get started with all these amazing people coming from the same town. I mean, you were in like the epicenter. And
Yeah.
talk a little bit about what brought you to Paris. Now you split your time between New York and Paris. Why Paris?
Well, on the way to between New York and Paris, I stopped in Los Angeles for 6 years. So it was the time when there was a writer's strike in New York City, and nobody but Woody Allen was filming at the time. There wasn't a lot of paying work when I got to a certain point in I guess it was the mid 90s when I decided I have to go to LA. So I went there and I immediately started working with a local theater company and stuck with them for 5 years, played some amazing roles in different shows and different plays like Early Morning by Edward Bond, Keith Radine's Almost Blue, um, Simon McDonald's The Life of Stuff, just some very offbeat plays in a really fantastic, huge warehouse with the Evidence Room Theater, directed by Bart DiLorenzo, who went on, is still directing all the time at the Odyssey Theater and LA Theater Works, South Coast Rep. So I worked with him steadily in LA, and I did some film work while I was there and made some really great connections. But after 6 years of being there, I knew that I wanted to have a family, and my husband material was not on the treadmill at Gold's Gym. It was not the kind of person I was looking for, to be my mate. And I had lived in Italy as a child, so I knew I wanted to get back to Europe. I wasn't sure where I wanted to go exactly, but I had some French under my belt. And I thought, you know what? I actually felt after those 6 years like I'm done with acting. I want something new, refreshing. I'm going to really work with my languages. And it makes the most sense to go to Paris. I had gone through France hitchhiking at a time when, okay, it was kind of dangerous, but certainly not out of the, not impossible to do like it is today. You can't do that today. But I went hitchhiking through France, and I'd had my first taste of, of this beautiful country and different cities in this country. And I knew I wanted to come back to Europe. So that it was really the decision to stop acting and foster more of more skills in the language area that I came to Paris for that, and for a family, to found a family. And guess what? I met my husband just 2 months after I got here. So that was amazing. Hardly even looking. And it was a lot harder to get fluent in French than I thought it would be. He convinced me to go to the Sorbonne when I really didn't speak fluently. And if you saw my notes from my first classes at the Sorbonne, oh my God, it's embarrassing. I don't know how I got through it, all in French and very advanced French, but it was a great challenge. And then I was out there. I was networking and meeting people and going to social events. And landed an agent here without trying very hard and started auditioning again, but just with a lot less effort than I had to put into it in Los Angeles. So I feel sort of like the career followed me. And I soon after I had children, I having young children in the French school system, in a French Catholic school, I felt the lack of the kind of creative outlets that I was offered as a child. And so with a couple of other incredibly talented parents at this school in the east part of Paris, we put together a show. We would meet for coffee in the morning and one day said, let's do a show. And it felt like it was almost more for us than the kids. We had we were 5 founding members of the Yellow Brick Theater, which is an association 1901 that I am still the artistic director of today. So that's 12 years now that I've been the artistic director. And at the time we started at École Massillon in Paris, we had a lawyer / bass guitar player. We had someone in the group that had worked at Prada who did the costumes. We had a virtuoso pianist who is still a virtuoso pianist. I mean, we had so much talent at this school in terms of the parents that we were able to put this together by rehearsing and casting in people's living rooms at the time. And then it grew and grew, and now we're in 5 different schools in Paris. So that's going strong, the Yellow Brick Theater School. And
That's wonderful. And yeah, I hear that all the time about the schools in France, how it's more still based off the Napoleonic system. It's like military schools. So it's like nice to have these creative outlets.
Yes, definitely. It's a beautiful school, but it felt very gray in a lot of ways and just a little devoid of that fun aspect, despite the great English section that it has, by the way, which we were very supported by that too. And the directrice at the time was happy to have the association come be a part of the school the following year after they saw the first show that we did, which was The Wizard of Oz. In 2010. So yeah, we're still doing it today.
So what does it look like today? I mean, is it still that you're doing a different show every year, every couple of months? It's kids of all ages?
We do 2 or 3 shows a year. Yellow Brick Theater has also been at the Sorbonne for 5 years. So I've directed, I think, 5 productions at the Sorbonne. And I have teachers. I have a team now of 4 or 5 teachers who go into different schools. And some of it is just improvisation and some of it is performance classes. And the ages range from 8 to adult. I mean, I have an adult Wednesday night class. I love it. It so connects me in an electrifying way to the work itself that I began learning when I was 14, that approach to acting. And now I'm starting to look at the whole milieu from a director's point of view because I've been directing more and more. I also changed agents at one point a couple of years ago. I'm with Talented in Paris now. They work really hard. They're real go-getters. And I worked on 4 different projects last year, including Aznavour and Gérald Le Conquérant, which will be coming out, I think, in a month or 2 with Fabrice Eboué. And Philip Proof's Truth or Consequences. I've been working on a web series now for 6 or 7 years in a row, playing the same character. So I've been able to stay close to the work itself as an actress while adding this other completely different point of view of the work from a director's seat. And I love that. And I'm talented at it. And I really enjoy just hearing I enjoy the work because I'm learning about people and what makes them tick and how they behave. It's like a sociology class. And I've had students of all ages and backgrounds. And it's really fascinating, that Wednesday night adult class that I teach. Yeah.
I love that you were like, yeah, I'm going to move to Europe and start a family. And then like 2 months later, it's like, okay, I have a husband. Let's do some kids. And here I am. I'm acting. I'm directing. I mean, it just all came together.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I guess I should add that it was a little bit for like selfish interests because I wanted my kids in that school to get to have some creative fun, but it turned out that it's grown and grown and grown, and they got to do a lot of shows over the years. My older daughter embraced it a lot. My younger daughter, after a couple of years, was like, I don't want to be so close to my mom anymore every single day. I want some independence. So she did. She played Juliet at one point, and then that was it. She threw in the towel. She's done. She's a teenager.
Exactly. Talk a
Yeah.
little bit about the difference between acting in the States versus France. I mean, I'm sure culturally and the way they do things from working in both countries, what are some of the big differences?
Wow, that's a good question. On the sets of films, I don't feel like there's a major big difference. I feel that people are very professional here. Um, you know, there's always the time element when you're on a set and there's a lot of money at stake and you have to be super prepared and know your stuff. And any project I've worked on here and the US in terms of film work, it's been, I find, very similar. Also, because a lot of times the actors have worked in both countries. It's funny that one of the first acting film jobs I got here was on a TV series called Joe with Jean Reno, and it, it, I played a thesis director at the Sorbonne. And I think only a few years before that, I graduated with a DESS from the Sorbonne. So that was kind of ironic to find myself in the hallways of the, Richelieu in the fifth arrondissement at the Sorbonne Mer, playing a role, and being on a set after having studied there academically. Yes, because I forgot to mention that I also went to the Sorbonne for 2 years. My husband convinced me to stay in France and really get fluent by going to school there. And yeah, so I came out with 2 certificates or degrees, maîtrise and DESS, mainly because I wanted to be able to talk about something other than acting at the dinner table.
Yeah, it's really full circle. I love that too, that you're acting and then being in it just 2 years before. And talk a little bit about how you approach new roles, whether it's film, stage, voiceover artists. How do you approach a new role?
Well, I guess all of those that you mentioned are different. Voiceover is a whole other thing, but stage or film, I read the script, I read it over and over again. I read what other characters say about my character because there's so much information in that. It's so important to read the full script. When you can get your hands on a script for an audition, the full script, it's really important. That is something that's slightly different in the US. I feel like that's more of the norm, that you would get a full script, even if you're auditioning for someone who has 1 or 2 scenes in the film. Whereas here, a lot of the times you only get the sides and you feel like that's really out of context and you don't really know what they're looking for because you don't have other information about that character. So you have to kind of just deal with the little that you get sometimes. I approach it, I read it in a million different ways. Well, a million. I read it in every way possible, throwing the words around, taking out the punctuation a lot of the time because I feel like I'll get to something more spontaneous if I don't pay attention to commas and periods in texts. And I have my students do that too. It depends on the text itself, whether or not what's in like parentheses or italics about what the actor's supposed to do, how important is that? So for a stage, for a play, theatrical piece, I would say in the beginning of rehearsing, I just ignore everything that's in parentheses and italics, and I really try to make it mine because I might come up with something more interesting. unless, I'm working on some, a classic, Moliere or O'Neill or Tennessee Williams, or, these old classics, where that tends to be more important. The action in the play and what the actor is doing tends to be more connected to what they're saying. Whereas with contemporary plays, and I go to New York, regularly, like I said, I'm back and forth. I go to New York regularly, and I go to the drama bookshop, and I come back to Paris with lots of recent work by up and coming writers in New York. Some of which is good and some of it which is great. And it's exciting to come back with scripts that students haven't seen here and fresh material. But there I tend to really, it may sound like it's not very respectful to the writer, but at first I really ignore all of that stuff in parentheses and italics. And I really just try to make the text mine and then start making choices, specific choices, which can change. Again, it's different if it's an audition or if I have the role. And then I'll go into rehearsal trying out different things. And that's something I also always enthuse my students to do or push them to do. That's something I always push my students to do, to try out something, even if it ends up being completely something we're going to throw away. It's really important in the early process to not get locked into something. It's interesting. I went to see a play last night, a comedy, a boulevard comedy, as they say in France, boulevard, right? Which is like Neil Simon-ish, slapstick, kind of very much about timing, doors slamming, another opening, comedy, that kind of comedy. And it was a very big theater with a huge audience. And the actors on stage, this is the first time I ever saw this happen. The actors began the show. They were maybe 3 minutes into their dialogue, two actors on stage, and an usher came in to the balcony where we were and started speaking at this volume level I'm speaking right now, saying, you have to move over there. Vous devez vous déplacer parce que j'ai un groupe de 5 personnes. I have a group of 5 people coming in that have to sit there. And she was speaking at this volume, and it was a huge theater with a gallery, balcony, orchestra, everything, The actors on stage just stopped and looked up at the balcony and confused at each other and said, "Oh no, mais là, we need to stop and start again." And the curtain came down and everybody got silent, and I couldn't believe it. I mean, I digress here, but it's just a theater story that in all my years of theater, I've never witnessed. Two actors on stage in such a huge venue have to stop because they're completely distracted by something going on up in the gallery. I mean, she was completely out of place, this usher, to do this. But what I noticed, the point I'm bringing up, is that when the curtain went back up about 7 minutes later, because they took their time backstage getting ready, they took their time, and I didn't blame them, to get refocused on what they were doing. But they came back on stage, the curtain went up, they came back on stage, and they said the beginning lines of the play exactly in the same tone that they had the first time through. And I thought, wow, okay, that's very choreographed. Like, to the millimeter, intonation is exactly the same. And I just think that's interesting because I know that some directors work that way and that you have to hit a certain mark, and if it works, keep it. But it felt to me like there was a lack of spontaneity in it as a result. And that there are probably a lot of different ways to say those lines and have them be funny, but they went exactly for the same intonation that they've probably done 300 times, because this is a show that's been going for quite a while, many performances. Anyway, I don't know if that's interesting to non-theater people, but I found it fascinating. And it just made me realize that that's what I often try to avoid as I teach, like, to get out of the groove of one way of saying something. There are so many ways of saying the same thing.
Yeah, that sounds really crazy to just I've never seen that stop a show completely and be like, okay, redo. Let's just go again.
Yes,
In front of
yes.
people. I mean, that's pretty wild. I feel like maybe that could only happen in France too.
Maybe. I don't know. You would think maybe your first thought was, wow, they're not very concentrated on stage. But the usher was very loud. I mean, I really couldn't blame them. I found it incredibly disrespectful. She was frustrated, obviously, but to speak at that volume, that was just crazy.
I
Anyway,
think it's kind of great that they restarted. I mean, yeah,
yeah,
get in
yeah,
the mode. So
absolutely.
in your experiences, like how has the representation of diverse voices and stories evolved in French cinema and theater? Like, do you see more diversity in voices and actors now since your time in France, or how has that evolved?
Huh, you mean on stage or in film or?
Yeah, exactly. Stage, film, acting in general.
Wow. I have to say, I haven't seen a lot of French cinema in recent years. I've seen a lot of international cinema. I'm not just, limited to watching American films by any means. But I haven't seen that much of French cinema recently. And on stage, what I find there is a certain approach to French theater that the only time I find that it's new and fresher than what I'm expecting it to be, like the Moliere School of Acting, where the actors come downstage and speak closely to the audience, sort of gesticulating, but I don't necessarily feel like they're connected so much on an emotional level to what they're saying. Sometimes it feels showy, the approach, but when it's not, it's like something at Théâtre Boeuf du Nord, for example. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that well, but or Théâtre de l'Atelier or La Colline, where there's some very exciting theater work going on in Paris for sure. Um,
Definitely. Yeah, I think things are probably always changing, but always set on that foundation because, France is set in their ways in a lot of ways, which is why we love it at the same time.
yes.
And talk about voice acting a little bit more. I mean, voice acting requires a unique set of skills. What are some of the techniques you find essential for bringing characters to life through voice alone? I mean, I can't imagine doing that.
I guess what I have to say first off is I love voiceover work because it doesn't matter what I look like. It doesn't matter what I choose to wear that day or how little sleep I got the night before. I don't have to look a certain way, and I love that freedom. Um, I would say, in terms of getting energy in the voice, there are things I do physically. My whole body is a part of it. Um, and it's true that when I don't physicalize a little bit, I mean, you can't move a lot when you're in a booth, but getting some tension in the body or getting some blood moving in the body is really makes a difference when you then listen to your voice afterwards. Um, I think there too, when I have the text beforehand, I try to do somersaults and roller coasters with my voice, and give it flexibility and um, get out any of the kinks that might be in my voice. I've also studied acting, so there are lots of warm up exercises that you can do with your voice that I do with my voice when I'm doing an audition, for example, for a voiceover. I look at the age, obviously, of the character and whatever is available, whatever information is given about that character, and really have to think about it, and how to incorporate it. I hope that
Definitely.
answered you.
Yeah, no, definitely. That makes sense. I mean, voice acting is so unique to me. And I like what you said about it doesn't matter what you look like, because that's always helpful too. You can just focus on the words.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I have a reel, that has a lot of different voices on it. Some of it's cartoon and it's silly, and some of it's more narrative. And a lot of the work that I've done so far has been documentary or feature film. You can hear my voice as the mother of Scarlett Johansson in Lucy, for example. or I'll play some kind of SWAT team, sort of Judi Dench type, James Bond head agent of the, of the team. Often I get cast that way. I think also what's worth talking about, Crystal, is self-taping today, for any actors listening to this, because that's such an interesting topic, I find, as we moved out of COVID and the convenience for everyone, I guess, involved in not having to go to an actual studio to audition live. Although for some actors, that works better. For me, that works better, actually. I love meeting the casting people and doing a live audition for them. But today it's very common to do self-tapes so that you can audition from, Dubai or Slovenia or London or New York, wherever you happen to be. You can send in a self-tape, at least get past that first filtering. Then often you have to go meet the casting people or director. But the self-tape process is really something. Today as an actor, you have to have the space, the white wall behind you, the right lighting. You have to have sometimes two people with you, one to read with you, another to film it. It's like you're traveling around with a little crew when you need to do a self-tape. And that's not always easy. It's not always the perfect weather to tape. There's a lot to think about in terms of self-tape now for you to put forth your best work.
Yeah, definitely. You have to do a lot more on your own and wear even more hats of what you're doing. I can totally
Exactly.
understand that. And is it true that when you're a voiceover for, an American character, but you're speaking French, like they always use that same voice for that actor? Like there's a French Will Smith, there's a French Judi Dench. Like
I'm convinced there is, and the place that I notice it the most is on that PNP uh, Père Noël card that you can get in on email now, that they send for children for their birthdays or for Christmas. There is one male voice who plays Santa, who plays the grandfather, rather, in a lot of films. I feel like I hear his voice all the time, everywhere. Like, there he is again. That man is making a really good living as a voiceover artist.
I love it. French Santa's doing all right. And
Yes.
talk a little bit about how Paris has influenced your artistic vision or shaped your career in the arts. Has Paris changed you?
It's more, I don't know if it's as much Paris and the beauty of Paris. There's something in the rhythm here that's different for me than when I'm in New York, which is just faster and maybe a little more brusque when I'm in New York. Here it feels like everything is a little bit rounder around the edges. It's less like sharp corners when I compare Paris to New York in terms of my work and how I approach it. It's, how can I say it? I think what's had a big influence on me in terms of my work, though, is having two children in the French school system and meeting other parents in Paris and hearing their experiences, either in their own career path or as parents of kids in this French school system. That's been a big part of my background personally here as an American, having raised two children here. I try to keep my household very creative. There's the piano in one corner and an artist table with lots of paints and whatnot in another corner, the guitar over there. I just try to keep all of those outlets accessible to my children, because I know that life here growing up in Paris, there is something very academic or cerebral about it. I find the biggest challenge for me as I walk down Parisian streets is that I feel a little less free than I do when I'm walking down a street in New York City. And maybe that's just because New York is my home state. Maybe it's because English is my mother tongue. I don't know why that is, but that's always been a challenge for me to get more and more free living in Paris.
Yeah, I think I've heard other people say that as well, and it makes complete sense that you would want to bring, more creativity into your kids' lives and make it very accessible. Like France is so great about bringing culture into everyone's lives, but as you said, it's very intellectual as well, and sometimes you can't really be silly or play, be childlike.
Yes. Yeah.
And how would you define creativity in your own words?
Oh, creativity is freedom. That's the first word that comes to mind. Freedom to make mistakes, try things out, experiment, and end up with something that touches you, the creator, firstly, I think, and then by proximity, by osmosis, touches other people. It's talent mixed with a certain kind of freedom.
I love that. Yeah, I ask everybody that question and everybody has a different answer. So,
Well, you know what? Creativity is also, I mean, I remember being at a certain point here where I felt frustrated in I don't know, 2007, 2008, where I felt like I'm not creating enough. I need to create more. I need that satisfaction. I felt a little bit stagnant. I was trying to write at the same time because I've also written for theater and performed some of my own work in New York City. But I remember thinking, wait a minute, creating is also having children and raising them. Every single day you have to create, whether you're creating a new dinner or creating a new way to deal with a tense moment at school, or creating a new approach to homework. I mean, it may sound silly, but there's creation in every moment of the day as you raise children and in the act itself of having children, right? So that's the ultimate creativity, creation.
I love that. Yeah, that's so true. Being a mother, I mean, you created human life. That's
Yes.
pretty creative, and you're creating a shape of that. You're forming that and raising them. So definitely, I think we need to be more open to what creativity means, because I think most people think it's painting or writing or whatever. But as you said, there's so many ways.
Yeah, I think it's taking something personal and putting it out there for the world to see. I think that's also creativity, knowing how to take something personal and bring it out into the world for others to connect with, identify with, relate to, and move other people in some way. Yeah.
And do you have any future projects you want to share with the audience?
Um, let's see. Well, I'm going back to New York now for a couple of weeks to continue teaching in New York. When I come back to Paris, we've launched with this theater group that I meet with once a week. We're beginning work on Ella Hickson's play called Swive about Elizabeth I. And it's super great writing, exciting and witty and challenging in many ways, because I'm working with some actors who are kind of young as actors and others who can handle that material a little more adeptly. And this is our project for the spring. So this is going to be our new creation.
Well, that sounds very exciting. And where can people connect with you and learn more about your work?
So I have a website that's almost done called that's LauraLiebleinAdam.com. And that is my official name, Laura Lieblein Adam. And I also used to be called Laura Darista. That's why I say that. So a lot of my prior work was under that name, Laura Darista, originally. That's my mother's maiden name. And I can be reached at ybtheater@gmail.com always. And otherwise, I do have Instagram, for the Yellow Brick Theater and for my own work as an actress at Laura_Liebs, Liebs _Adam. That's Instagram. I'm getting more and more hip with Instagram.
Well, that's perfect. We'll share all of that in the show notes so people can connect with you. And thank you so much for sharing with me today.
Thank you so much, Crystal. It's been a pleasure. Thanks for the opportunity. It's great what you're doing.
Thanks so much for tuning in to La Vie Creative. You can find more information on MissParisPhoto.com. And if you enjoyed this show, please feel free to share and spread the word for all my creative guests. We have the power to help them to keep doing what they love. See you next time.